Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started just because I think I have a good amount of content. I want to make sure we get through it with enough time for everyone to ask questions. So my name is Bonnie Brzozowski. I'm a reference librarian at the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library. Today we're going to be doing a workshop or a little class about online privacy and security. I have with me today Mary Jackson, and you should be able to see her as well. Mary can wave at us. She's our community library specialist at Alsea Community Library. Mary is going to be helping with any questions that you guys might have as we go through the webinar. Just to sort of orient you to how GoToWebinar should probably look for you. Usually on the right-hand side of your page, you have a few controls. The one at the top is generally orange, and it is an arrow that is either pointing to the right or pointing to the left. If it's pointing to the right, it means it will hide those controls from you. If it's pointing to the left, if you click on it or tap on it, it should pull up the controls that you have access to. The other controls you have access to, so there are two ways that you can interact with us through this webinar. You can raise your hand, that's the control at the bottom of that little sliver of icons you should be seeing. At the bottom, there should be something that looks like a hand, and you can raise that hand. You can also ask questions as well. So I see we did get a question already, which is great. That's a great way to use the questions. So someone can't see the arrows, but it looks like, I'm sorry that you can't see the arrows, but at least it looks like you can ask questions, and that's really the key way to interact with us. So as long as you can see enough to be able to ask a question or to be able to raise your hand, that should allow us to be able to interact with you. So what I'm hoping is that we can try to get through some of the content, and then I will take your questions at the end, and I'm hoping that I can get done at about 11, maybe a little after 11, and then we can use the rest of that time. I can answer questions. I could maybe even unmute people and we can start talking to each other. That's a possibility too if you have an internal or an external mic on your device or computer. But definitely as I'm going through stuff, if I'm not making any sense to you, if I've really gone just over your head, please put in a question, be like, help, I'm not understanding this. And then Mary will slow me down, or ideally I will see the question and I will slow down and I'll try to re-explain, because I don't want to push too far ahead if you're truly not understanding what I'm talking about. So with all that said, before we really dive in, I just wanted to show you guys one quick thing, and that's the library's webpage, because I want to make sure that you know where you can find all of the virtual events that we're doing, like this one. So on my screen here, you should be seeing the library's homepage. It's cbcpubliclibrary.net, also cbcpl.net, or just Google us, that'll get you there. When you look under events here, you have access to the event calendar that will show you everything that we're doing for all ages, and it does focus on our virtual events, because that's really all we're doing right now, of course, since the library's closed. But then it also is broken down by adult events, kids events, and teen events, if you want to check that out. I wanted to point out that on the adult events page, we do keep a feed of upcoming events on the right-hand side here. So these are all of our upcoming things. I can get to scroll, here we go. It's Digital Life right there. We're doing zines tomorrow. We're also doing a star party tomorrow, which somehow isn't on here, but usually would be. I also want to point out that if you're interested in this topic, it's possible you might be interested in a talk that we're going to be doing in July. Let me pull that up if I can. It is towards the end of July. It is a discussion called True or False, Navigating Information Online. Here it is. I thought it was July 23rd, but I didn't want to speak too soon. July 23rd at 6 p.m. What we're going to be we're hoping that this might become a series of some kind, and it's a discussion where I'll do a little bit of presentation at the beginning over a particular topic, and then we'll discuss it. This particular topic that we're going to talk about is social media policies regarding removing information, editing information, or labeling information that's posted on social media sites. So for example, you might have heard about how some of the president's tweets have been labeled by Twitter as perhaps being manipulative or inciting violence or something like that. So we're going to talk about like, what do these platform policies mean? Why are they being enforced like this? Is it appropriate to enforce them this way? How should platform policies be enforced? And how should our language online sort of be monitored and managed, if at all? So I'm really interested in what people's perspectives are on that. I'm going to provide some background and then we'll talk about it. So I hope you'll join me for that. That's something new that we're offering. Otherwise, there's a lot of really great stuff. Keep an eye out, especially if you have teens or kids. We always have really good stuff for them in particular. So with all of that said, I think we're ready to dive in. I wanted to start by doing a poll. Let me get my here. And we do have a question in there. So Deborah, are you able to hear us? It sounds like someone's having a problem that their screen has gone black and is asking, is the audio working? Or other people, if you're able to hear me, could you hit that raise hand button so I can see who is hearing me? Anybody else? Just hit that raise hand if you can hear me. So people can hear me okay? It looks like most of you, I think, can probably hear me.
We have two that aren't
raising.
right.
Oh, here we go. Now we've got just one person not raising their hand. Okay, so but it looks like most people at least are hearing me, so it doesn't sound like there's an error on my end, which is good. If your screen has gone blank, my only suggestion would be to perhaps leave the webinar and then jump back in and see if that changes anything. That would be my best guess. So I would say give that a try, but get back in touch if you're still not seeing or hearing from us. And I'm going to go ahead and lower those hands if I can. Okay, and we'll get started. Let me get so everyone can see my screen. Great. And I'm going to make that full screen, so it's just right up front for us. Here we go. Perfect. So let's go ahead and dive in to the topic today. Before I get started, I did want to point out that much of this presentation is taken directly from a website called Surveillance Self-Defense. It's provided by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and that link is there. It's also included, you may have noticed that there is a handout that should be included for you as part of those options that you have on the right-hand side of your screen, the little GoToWebinar panel, control panel. And there should be something that says resources for online privacy and security under handouts. That you can feel free to download and keep. Those are links, which includes a link to the Surveillance Self-Defense website. But those are links to information I'm going to cover in this, as well as a lot of additional information we're just simply not going to have time to cover. So it's a lot of tools and other things that you might be interested in exploring further when you have time. So take a look at that, and I'll probably point out some of those links as we go through. So I'm going to go over just the class outline really quick. I also just want to point out that the whole point of doing a class like this, understanding online privacy and security, it's just so important to protecting yourself online, obviously. If you bothered to come to this webinar, it's probably important to you, or at least it's something that you realize that you need to work on or need to make sure that you understand better. What I'm going to be talking about are a lot of concepts that kind of explain how computers work and share information with one another to a certain extent. And I think that that's really, really helpful in understanding how to protect yourself online. You have to kind of understand what are the mechanisms, like how is information sharing actually work when we're sharing information online, so you know what needs to be protected and why. So today we're going to talk about security as a process. So security isn't just like getting some kind of antivirus software and calling it quits. You're done, you're secure. It's really a process. It's something that is always ongoing. It's not something that you ever really finish. It's because it's always changing. That's part of the nature of technology. Technology is always changing. It's always getting different. So that's the same for security. Our security and privacy practices actually always have to be changing and evolving because the technology is always changing and evolving. We're going to talk about threat modeling. So that is just actually looking at like what kind of information are we trying to protect? Who are we trying to protect it from? By knowing some of those things, that can help us understand how we should actually protect that information. We might realize that some information might not be super important to us to protect, and some information is crucial for us to protect. And that's fine to see those differences and understand where you might have to make it kind of inconvenient for yourself to access something because you need it to be really secure, whereas something that like, I'm going to keep this really convenient to access because it's not super important to me. Software updates, that's a pretty quick talk, but we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about how to develop and store secure passwords. We're going to talk about malware, phishing attacks, and antivirus, and what those are, and then also ways to protect yourself. We're going to talk about metadata and encryption because those two concepts are really important to understanding online privacy. And it looks like this little bullet point got a little messed up, so sorry about that. And we're also going to talk about how to browse online privately and how to search online privately. We're going to talk about privacy on social networks, and that'll be a pretty brief one, but just some notes on that. We're going to talk about safety on public Wi-Fi. We're going how to stay safe on public Wi-Fi and avoid being hacked when you're on public Wi-Fi. We're going to do a really basic talk about privacy on mobile phones, but just to note that all of the things that I talk about today, security and privacy related, while I call this computer security and privacy, it works exactly the same for most mobile devices as well. And I'm going to talk about that. So most of what I'm talking about is going to be specific to your smartphone as well, because your smartphone is essentially just a tiny computer. But I am going to also address them a little bit directly as well. We're going to talk about securing lost phones because that's really important. We're going to talk about facial recognition and contact tracing as well. Contact tracing has come up a lot recently as a privacy concern, so we'll bring that up as well. Okay, so security is a process, as I said, just diving in. Protecting all data from everyone at all times is impractical and exhausting. So that's why we're going to threat model. We're going to actually look at what data needs really high security, what data doesn't need as much security. So we'll look at that next. The other point, which I kind of made earlier, is that what's secure today just may not be secure tomorrow. So you have to keep up with computer security and privacy, and that can feel really overwhelming and exhausting, and maybe even a little terrifying. But if you rely on sites like Surveillance Self-Defense, and this is a site from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they're a pretty well-respected and reputable organization that focuses on keeping journalists safe online. So if you think about it, journalists are often trying to break stories that they don't want other people to know about, and sometimes those people might be the government. So they have a lot invested in the sources that they're keeping and the information that they're keeping. They need it really well protected. So the EFF, the EFF helps everyone, but it does especially look at people who are in really sensitive professions that need all the information on their devices very secure. So it's a great website because they're always trying to stay on top of it in terms of what's changing and what you need to be looking out for. So Surveillance Self-Defense is a great website to just be checking regularly. They do update it regularly, and it's just a great place for this information. Something that I think is worth pointing out is that it is okay to trust someone, but just know who you're trusting. And so what I mean by that is, like, sometimes there are certain organizations that we can trust with our privacy and security. Sometimes there are some that we can't, and we sort of have to make those calls. But I think that sometimes when I go through this presentation, most people come to the conclusion, I can't trust anyone ever, anytime, and that's not the conclusion I hope you will draw. I'm just trying to show you where all those potential points of spying or people trying to hack you, where all those little points are, so you can decide what needs to be secured and what's not. And then we have to find who are those organizations and companies who make products that we're going to use, who are those people that we trust to help secure our information and keep our information private. We've got to identify those people, and we're going to do that today. Another point, security is not a purchase. As I said earlier, you can't just buy McAfee antivirus, for example, and be like, okay, I'm done. I don't need to think about this anymore. That's just not the way it works, I'm afraid. And then we need to think of security holistically. And so if I do a ton to secure my phone, I've got a great passcode on it, I've got all my passwords locked down and only accessible through my fingerprint or something like that, I've really got it well done. But then I didn't put a password on my laptop, and all my passwords are saved in my browser. That's a point right there that someone could easily get in and then potentially hack all of that data that you have on your phone, because you also access it on your computer, yet your computer doesn't have that same security. So we've got to kind of think of security as a whole, all the different places that it could be messed with or interfered with, and yeah, thinking of it as a whole. So threat modeling. So a few basic questions you can ask yourself: what do I want to protect? Who do I want to protect it from? How bad are those consequences if I fail in protecting it? How likely is it that I'm going to need to protect it? And how much trouble am I willing to go through to prevent the consequences? And I think that last one is really important. The convenience part, right? Like, how inconvenienced am I willing to be to protect this data? How important is it to me? So let's look at some, this is me, just as a consumer, my thoughts if I threat model my bank info, financial info. So if I want to protect my bank info, I bank online. I pay my credit card bill online as well, for example. So if I want to protect that information, let's kind of threat model that. Who do I want to protect it from? Well, hackers and thieves, of course. This is information that is regularly sought after by hackers and thieves. It's stuff that cyber criminals might want to get a hold of and work to get a hold of sometimes. What are the consequences? If I fail, how bad are they? I mean, I could experience identity theft, asset loss. That's pretty bad for me. And how likely is it that I'm going to need to protect it? Well, as we're going to find, malware is pretty common. Viruses and malware are pretty common, and additionally, there's lots gained by getting this info. So how much trouble am I willing to go through to prevent potential loss of this info? I'm willing to go through a lot. I'm willing to really lock this info down and sort of inconvenience myself a bit when I need to get to it, if that's what needs to happen. Because ID theft and asset loss are no joke. I don't want to deal with those things. But let's look at like maybe something that might be a little bit lighter for me. So I'm a librarian. I regularly share what I read with people all the time. It's really common for me to talk about what I read with people. So in thinking about my reading history, this is info that I don't necessarily feel so strongly about protecting, because I share it really openly with lots of different people, even people I don't know well at all. So who might I want to protect this info from? As I said, there's not a lot of people that I think I want to protect it from, but if I'm really thinking it through, my privacy might be at issue here. Perhaps like corporations or other marketers might want to somehow get that info and then use it to market to me, and maybe I wouldn't appreciate that. But really for me, that's honestly not so big a deal. It's not protecting my reading history. So I use Goodreads. So that might be a website that someone might try to hack and then use that info against me, for example. But again, I just don't think that there's much of a threat. I'm not really as willing to lock down my Goodreads account with super secure security as opposed to my banking info. So hopefully that kind of gives you just sort of a way of thinking about like, hey, is this info really important or not? How far am I going to go to protect it? So, and we will talk about ways to protect it soon. The first point I want to make about computer security, though, in terms of things you should be doing to protect your computer security, is making software updates. And software updates are seriously the most important thing that you could be doing for your computer security. And I'm surprised at how few people are making them and allowing them to be automatic. So always update your software, update your apps on your phone, always. Make those updates automatic. The most frequent reason I hear for people not doing this is because it is inconvenient in some way. It's inconvenient perhaps because they don't want their software to change. They don't want the app to change in any way. And I understand that sentiment, but at the same time, like that's just the way that technology works, and it's always changing. It's always going to change. And when people are frequently, not always, but frequently when people are making updates to software and apps, is to close security and privacy holes where people could potentially, where either perhaps it's been discovered that someone has been able to hack into it, or someone realizes it's possible to hack into it and they want to close that hole for you. So that's why it's so important. It's just the easiest, most general advice that everyone should be doing. Please do it. I also want to point out that if you are using Microsoft Windows 7, Vista, or XP, you really should stop. You really should update to Windows 10. And the reason is that Microsoft Windows is not providing any updates to those systems any longer. They're done with it. So any security holes that either exist there currently or that people find are not going to be closed. And so those are going to become incredibly hackable systems. In fact, some of them are already very hackable systems. It's also true for Mac OS X before El Capitan. The thing is that Mac OS X generally gives people free software updates and operating system updates is what I'm trying to say. So most Mac OS X users just aren't on those older systems because Mac OS X has pretty much forced you to move up the chain. But if you are using something really old, and again, or as old as this or older, please update. It's just super important that you do that. The other really big thing, probably the most important advice for your security online and via your computer, is to create secure passwords on all accounts, and that all accounts really. I'm going to go over what a secure password is, but the thing is what hackers are most focused on usually is trying to get passwords, and they've been really successful in the past at getting people's passwords. And the problem is once they've identified one of your passwords, if you reused that password on any other site, there's a good chance they're going to figure that out. So they have computer programs available or that they create essentially that go through and guess passwords, like just like the drop, like in seconds, it'll guess thousands and thousands of passwords. So it's so fast. It's just computers essentially trying to break your password. Some of them are really good at it. So you need to be just crazy smart when it comes to your passwords. Your passwords have to be at least 12 to 16 characters long. They need to contain a combination of numbers, symbols, uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and or spaces. You want to avoid like dictionary names or dictionary words, places, names, anything that can be like looked up in a dictionary. So basically, people that are designing these computer programs that can hack your passwords, they're essentially putting the entire dictionary into that thing, and it's going to guess every dictionary word possible. And it might do like hello 222, and then hello 223, and then hello 224, and it'll go through all of those different variations until it cracks you. So you want to avoid things like repetition, like 111, 222, avoiding simple patterns. Like this is really common now for people to sort of use symbols and letters in a mix to still create sort of a readable phrase. So this is the example here is Go Bears. It's lowercase g, a 0, and then BE @R $. Even that has actually become really easy for these programs to guess. So you also don't want to put all your special characters at the beginning or the end. That's a very typical human thing to do. So don't do it. And again, never, ever reuse a password. The thing with this is an incredibly overwhelming list of things for you to do. So here's some examples of secure passwords if any of that information was confusing or you had some questions about it. And as you can see, these are truly random passwords. They're just not easy to remember. So the idea of having several accounts, or like for me, for example, I've got like maybe 60 plus online accounts. How would I ever remember a password like this for every single one of those sites? The thing is I won't. I'm a human, and I'm just simply not going to remember it. What I need to do, and what I really highly recommend most people do, is use a password manager. Most people, or not most people, but some people are a little wary of password managers. The way a password manager works, if you're not familiar, is, and so for example, I use LastPass. It is free. They do have paid versions as well. There's also something called KeePass, K-E-E, that's another popular one, KeePass. That one has a free and paid version as well. And so basically what you do is you sign up for it, you create an account, you create an incredibly secure password, because now that's going to become your sort of one password to remember all of your passwords. You'll create this one password, and then you're going to go into that password manager and save each site's information where you log in. So like for example, I would take my bank's website, I'd put in the URL, I would add the username, I would add the password, I would save it. I would create truly random so LastPass, for example, will actually generate a random secure password for you, and I can use that as my banking password, have my LastPass save it for me, and then I never have to remember that password again. So most, actually almost all, I haven't actually been able to find a computer security expert that thinks this is a bad idea. All of them are recommending you use a password manager, because they truly are the most secure way to store a bunch of highly secure passwords. If you're not convinced, there is another method called the Diceware method. If you want to learn more about the Diceware method, I encourage you to Google it. What the Diceware method essentially is you have a 6-sided die. You roll it, I believe, 6 times. It generates a random 6-digit number. And then there are things, and if you look up Diceware method, you'll find it. There's like essentially a key where you can find that exact number you just generated, and it will give you a word. And so I think you generate about 7 of those words to have a secure password, and you put all of those words together. So it truly is 7 completely random passwords. The thing is that human brains cannot come up with truly random passwords. So this is a way to come up with 2 truly random 7 words, push them together into a phrase, and then that becomes your sort of passphrase. So I've heard of that as a method as well. I want to show you actually a little video about passwords. It really is the most important thing. The EFF actually has these little videos that they've made. They're short animations that are incredibly useful and easy to understand. I would like to show you one now, so hang in there with me while I pull it up. Great, so thanks for bearing with me through that. The other thing that it points out is that you can write down passwords. Actually, for a while, people would say things like, you should never ever write down passwords, but if you write your passwords down and keep them, let's see, here we go, keep them in, I'm trying to flip back to, here we go. But if you write them down and keep them in a place that you would know as soon as they are gone from that place, that would be another secure way to keep them. So even though, I mean, the only thing with that though is imagine if you do keep them in your wallet and your wallet gets stolen. That means that instantaneously you've got to go to all of those websites and change your passwords as soon as possible. And if those passwords are truly random and you can't recall them, that could be a problem. There are other ways though to secure these accounts through, for example, 2-factor authentication, and we're going to talk about that in a second. I do actually a class, or I did in the past when the library was open, I used to do a class specifically on passwords. We did a whole hour on passwords and talked about how to get set up into a password manager. If you're really interested in getting that started and doing that, let's talk about it at the end of this and find a way for us to connect. I would be more than happy to help you get started with a password manager. When I moved to a password manager, it did take me some time to move there. As I said, I have a lot of online accounts, so it took some time for me to change my password to truly random ones and then get them all into my password manager. I didn't expect it to happen overnight. It was something that was a few weeks long process where I worked on it a little bit here and there until I finally securely moved all my passwords there. So it's also just incredibly convenient, I believe, as the EFF video said. It just makes it to where I log in to one place and then my passwords autofill if I have it set up correctly. So again, I'd be happy to talk to you more about that if that's something you want to explore, how to make that really easy for yourself and how to get going on it. Let's move forward. The other ways that you can secure those accounts, though, is also have good security questions. So the thing is that honest answers to a lot of security questions can be easily hacked. So for example, my mother's maiden name is really easy to find. It's also really easy to find out where I was born. All you need is access to a tool such as Ancestry.com to quickly look that up about me, especially since my name is very distinct. So honest answers to these questions it's just not a good idea for me. That's where my password manager has actually come in really handy. So the one way that you could do it is you could try to choose questions that no one would just be able to easily find out about you. So for example, like what my favorite band was, your favorite teacher, something like that, something that ideally only you would know or very few people would know. The other advice is to give fictional answers. But the thing is can you remember those? That's the beauty of the password manager, is the password manager actually has a notes section in it. And so, hi, sorry, my webcam got turned off, but I think you guys can still hear me. I'm not sure what happened there.
I think you might be doubled up, Bonnie.
Oh, I am?
There are two webcams up there, or two pictures of you.
Okay, on my side it says I have no webcam.
That's interesting. Okay.
So I don't know if you guys can see me or not. According to my thing, it says you can't, but it looks like you can see my screen, I hope.
Why would that be?
Okay, I'm just gonna keep going through because I want to make sure we don't get too behind. I still have a lot of content to cover. So, so as I said, like you could just give fictional answers. Let's see, are people still hearing me and stuff? Okay, so someone can see their screen and not me. So I'm gonna share myself again because mine, it says I'm not sharing. So I'm gonna share myself again.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No worries. Cool. So yeah, so if you answer these security questions, you could give fictional answers and save them in your password manager because you've got that little notes field attached to each little password you have saved. I actually have totally random generated passwords for each of my security questions. So that makes it extra specially secure. So if you have the option to set up security questions, do it for sure because it's going to help add a layer of security, but do it wisely. Choose either really good questions or make them very random answers that you've been able to save somewhere so you can access them again. The other piece for those accounts is turn on two-factor authentication anytime a website makes it available to you. Not everyone's going to make it available to you, and that's fine. It's also sometimes referred to as 2FA. Basically, it just adds a step to your login. So whenever I log in, I put in my username, I put in my password, and then something will come up saying, hey, we need to send a code to this phone number. We need to send a code to this email address, and you need to type that code in order to get in. So that's going to help you a lot if you ever get hacked. As long as someone doesn't actually have your phone in their hand or access to your email, that should cut them off from being able to access your account if it were to ever be hacked. So it's a good idea to turn this on at least on your really important accounts. Turn it on your, I've never heard of a bank that doesn't offer 2FA, never heard of an email account so far that doesn't offer 2FA. Those are two really important places to have it turned on. So let's talk about malware a bit. So malware, sometimes you might hear it as viruses, Trojan horses, that kind of thing. That's maybe a little more old school. Most people are concerned with malware. Basically, all viruses are malware, essentially. So malware is short for malicious software. It's intended to harm computer users. It's generally criminal activity of some kind. Malware can do a lot of things. It's sort of like a software that just installs onto your computer. And it can do things like disrupt how your computer operates. It can gather sensitive information about you. It could be actually just someone impersonating you to send messages to other people to try to install that malware on other people's computers that you know. It can also gain access to private computer systems as well. So what do we do about malware? How do we protect ourselves against malware? The thing is that malware can come up anywhere, really. Anytime that you download something, there's a chance that it could be malware. So that's why we need to think about, what are we downloading? Should I be downloading this? Is this from a legit, valid place that I trust? But let's talk. We're going to talk about that. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Things that you can do to protect yourself against malware. You want to be wary of suspicious attachments. So that's one of the more common ways that this happens, is that you get an email, maybe from someone you know, maybe from someone you don't. They have some kind of thing. They're like, hey, look at this. This is so cool. Or, hey, here's something I thought you'd be interested in. And it's an attachment. So you want to be wary of any suspicious attachment. It's really common for malware to be emailed to you. You want to run your software updates. Those software updates are going to close those holes where malware might be trying to exploit you in some way. So always run your software updates. In terms of what you actually need installed on your computer, or should have installed on your computer to protect against malware, interestingly, not much. It's really good habits that are going to help you the most through protecting against malware. And we're going to talk more about some of those habits here soon. But what they recommend, so there's a website called thewirecutter.com that you might be familiar with. It's a pretty good website for overviews on things like antivirus protection, for example. And they have a great article, which I do include in the resources handout. I'm not sure on what page, I'm afraid. I can look later if you're interested, but somewhere on this resources handout, there is a link to this article in the Wirecutter. What they say is that if you're running a PC, which is I think like 75% of us, if you're running Windows on a PC computer, use Windows Defender. Windows Defender is free. It is already on your Windows 10 computer. If you have Windows 10, you have Windows Defender. Windows Defender is on by default. So you would have had to have gone in and turned it off. If you've done that, let's turn it back on, and I could help walk you through that at some point, or I could also help walk you through making sure Windows Defender is set up for you and that kind of thing. So that's an appointment I could always set up with you where we work on that together. But you want to make sure Windows Defender is going. It's really the best malware antivirus protection for PCs. The thing with Mac is that Mac is, because so many fewer people use Macs, they're not targeted quite as often for malware attacks. However, it's not impossible to get malware with a Mac. But the thing is that Macs also tend to have just better overall protection in their operating systems from malware. In general, if you're using a Mac, you have good behaviors, you don't need anything installed. Some people, though, hate me saying these things, even though you can read about them as well. Some people really, really want an antivirus. They feel more comfortable with some kind of protection, and that's totally fine. From what I have found, these are the best ones out there. You can also do this research, though, as well. Websites like PC Magazine, Lifehacker, sites like that are going to, CNET is another one, will do comparisons of antivirus and kind of tell you what's great about them, what isn't, what they recommend. So you could do that yourself. But from my research doing that kind of thing, I have found, and I actually use both of these products as well. So if you want to know more, we could talk about it. Bitdefender is a good overall malware antivirus protection suite. It's sort of similar to a Norton antivirus or McAfee, which honestly, those are not recommended at all. So if you're using those, I would recommend stopping your subscription if you can, and uninstalling. They're really have those products have not proved very useful against antivirus actually. So Bitdefender is one of the best. But again, I don't think you need it unless you are unsure about your behavior being very secure, or if you're trying to secure really, really sensitive data, you might want to turn Bitdefender on. This is not free. I should also mention these two bonus pieces of software are not free. Honestly, I cannot remember off the top of my head how much Bitdefender is a year. It's a fairly low yearly cost, but again, it's not free. And in fact, you're not going to want to use free antivirus. I'm not aware of any free antivirus that is recommended in any way. So except here I'm about to totally contradict myself, because Malwarebytes. So Malwarebytes specifically focuses on protecting against malware only. So it focuses on malware. And in fact, if you were going to choose one or the other, say like, oh, I want to install one of these, but I don't know which one I should prioritize, I would say do Malwarebytes over Bitdefender. But Bitdefender is more your classic antivirus suite, if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Hey, Bonnie.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. I think we might have an issue with the screen not advancing for some people.
Okay.
If you want to take a quick poll or something, because
yeah,
some people are back on security question.
Okay. So let's see. So who can see the malware screen that I'm on right now? Can you raise your hand if you're seeing the how do I protect myself against malware screen? So some people are and some people aren't.
Right,
okay.
we have 3.
I'm not sure why it wouldn't be advancing, but I don't necessarily know how to fix that at this point, but what I will point out, and I didn't at the beginning and should add, is I'm going to email these slides to everybody after the webinar's over. So I'll email these to you. So I'm sorry that you can't see them. I'll try to read from them more too, so since you're not necessarily seeing what I'm seeing. So that should help as well, but you will get to also see them at the end. So if there's anything that I'm talking about, pretty much it's all in text on my slides. So hopefully that'll help. I also see a question, what about Linux OS? That's a really good question, and this information should apply well to Linux OS. I would say Linux OS is a little bit more like Mac. It's not typically targeted by malware. I would want to read more specifically about Linux OS though, because I didn't focus on Linux OS when I developed specifically the piece about malware. So I would be happy to do a little bit more research on that and send you some links. The article that I did read from Wirecutter is supposed to apply to all operating systems. And in my experience, Linux is a lot more like Mac. So I would say it's probably going to be very similar in that you really don't need to be running anything unless you just feel super uncomfortable with that. And in that case, I would recommend doing Malwarebytes. Malwarebytes has a free version, and the free version does work fairly well. But you can also subscribe if you want more features. So I actually do subscribe to Malwarebytes. I believe it's about $45 a year. But again, that free version can actually work okay for people. So that's a thought. So this is really, really dense, and again, like my slides are not really very appealing visually, and I apologize for that. I kind of did that on purpose because I'm hoping that these being really text heavy prevent you from having to make a lot of notes, and you'll be able to sort of go back through this presentation and kind of know what we talked about without just seeing like images and being like, oh wait, what did we talk about? So that's why they're so text heavy. I apologize. And this slide is how malware can take over, and there's a few different ways. As I mentioned earlier, an email attachment. So sometimes you might get a strange email, or maybe the email will be from someone completely familiar, but there'll be some kind of attachment, and once you download that attachment, it can install malware. Malicious web links. So sometimes people will, simply by visiting a web page, sometimes it will go into that web page, something will come up and be like, oh, okay, do you want to install this? And you might just hit yes or run or install, and then you're potentially installing some kind of malware. So again, like, never install or download anything that you're not sure of. If you don't know what you're downloading or installing, don't do it. If you don't know who it's coming from, don't do it. So that's kind of what this next one is about, downloading third-party apps or software. Generally, unless you're really confident in what you're doing, you're only going to want to download apps from your App Store or your Google Play Store. If you're downloading apps, you're only going to want to download software from the people who make that software. So if I want Microsoft Office, for example, I need to go and buy Microsoft Office from Microsoft Office and use their software. I wouldn't want to buy Microsoft Office from some third party and they say they're going to install it for me. That's really sketchy. So you might be familiar with browser extensions. So anytime you're using your web browser, you're using the web, you're using a particular type of web browser to browse the web. That could be Chrome, Firefox, Edge, or Internet Explorer, for example. So anytime you're using those, many of them have browser extensions. They're kind of little things that can do various things for you. So for example, there's one that you can download that will shorten web addresses for you, so you can easily send them to other people, because sometimes web addresses are crazy long, right? And you want to just make sure that whenever you're downloading browser extensions like that, you're downloading them from the people who make them, and you're confident in that, in the people who make them, that you know you don't have any reason to believe that they're trying to install malware. One thing that you can check sometimes on those the App Store, the browser extension store, is there are typically reviews and comments, and sometimes if those reviews and comments are really bad, that you might want to pay attention to that. Sometimes it's just because the product isn't so great, but sometimes it's because they're like, hey, this installed malware, hey, beware, don't use this is malware. So sometimes you'll see stuff like that, or sometimes you'll see that nobody has it installed, or like only 2 people have it installed. That's really weird. That would be a red flag to me. Sometimes attackers can actually take, the other way that you can get malware, sometimes attackers can actually take a USB or CD and put it into your computer and install it onto your device. This is more like if your computer were just left alone in a public place, for example, for a length of time while you run to the bathroom. It is possible. I don't know how many people are installing malware this way, or what the level of risk there is, but there's the chance. And so you just really, I would never leave my computer unsecured in a public area, honestly, not only for this reason, but for other reasons as well. It's just not a good idea. Phishing attacks, that's just a way of installing malware, and it's kind of similar to what we've sort of already talked about it in some ways. It's basically when something is sent to you via email, it looks innocent, but it contains like a malicious link or a document that if you open, it's going to install malware. Or it might sort of look like a certain website that's you click on the link in the email, and then it's made to look like a website that seems legitimate. Like, for example, I've seen this with the IRS. So sometimes someone will pose as the IRS and you click on the link. One thing that was notable about the link is the link was www.irs.com. So it didn't have a dot between the www and the IRS. So it should have been www.irs.gov. There is no irs.com. It's irs.gov. So that was another thing that could have been a red flag, but those weren't red flags. They clicked on the link. but then they go to this page where they were being asked for their debit card number and their PIN. And so why would the IRS ever ask you for that info? No one ever asks you for your PIN. Why does the IRS need your debit card number? They don't need that info. So those were red flags. The IRS doesn't need that info. Another little thing was that we were on that weird website. And another thing was the IRS logo. It was a very convincing looking website. The IRS logo was all blurry. So like someone had taken a bad image of it and put it there. So it's things like that, just paying extra special attention to what you're doing, who you're giving your info to, what you're opening. Phishing for passwords is really common too. So I kind of already described this scenario with the IRS. But like, so some phishers, they'll just use a variation of a popular website like www.paypal.co instead of paypal.com, a really subtle difference that you might not notice. And then when you go there, it'll be like, okay, put in your username and password, and you've actually put that into the wrong website, to a website that you shouldn't have put it into. This is kind of the good thing about those password managers is the password manager, when I have LastPass, my password manager, I have the browser extension for LastPass installed in Chrome, which I've been using Google Chrome as my web browser. So what that does is anytime I go to a page, my LastPass will actually be like, oh, hey, we have a password saved for this page. Want us to put it in there? And I'll be like, yes, no, whatever I'm doing. If I went to paypal.co, my password manager would be like, hey, we don't have any passwords saved for this. And that would automatically be like, wait, what? Of course I have a PayPal password. And then maybe I'd see like, oh, because I'm not actually at the PayPal site. So just something to pay attention to. Phishing is really common, and a really, really common way to get to accidentally give up passwords or to get malware installed. So pay attention to stuff like that. Protecting against phishing, I think it might be somewhat obvious to you now that we've done a little bit of this and talked about it, but keep your software updated. Use a password manager with autofill or with that browser extension, so your password manager will recognize when you actually have a password for that site or not. Verify emails with people before opening the extension. So say like Uncle Bob sent you something and is like, this is cool, open this. Why maybe just call Uncle Bob or just email him back and be like, hey, did you really send this? Do you want me to open this? What is this? It seems suspicious. And they can let you know. Another kind of cool little trick is to actually open suspicious documents in Google Drive or another service. So if you use Gmail or Hotmail, for example, or Yahoo Mail, those all have a cloud storage of some kind that's automatically integrated into your email. Even if you don't know it exists. And it's sometimes people discover it and they're like, whoa, they have all these documents saved. I'm like, yes, they've been saving all your documents for you, whether you knew it or not. But so with Gmail, for example, that's the one I use, so it's a little easier for me to talk about that, but others have it too. I can actually just look at an attachment without having to download it. It'll say open in Google Drive for me. I can show you the icon at some point if that's useful. We could do a one-on-one and we could look at your email and I could show you how to do this. You can actually just open it. I could open it with Google Drive. So that forces Google Drive to open it on one of their servers. I'm not opening it on my computer. I'm not downloading it to my computer. So I'm not at risk for that malware anymore. And I can kind of take a look at that attachment and be like, hey, what is this? And decide whether or not it's something I actually do want to download and save or what have you. And then, of course, the last point there, be careful of emailed instructions, as I think I've mentioned many times now. Although I've already really talked about this, so I'm going to skip through it. This is actually might be where my Wirecutter link lives. It may, if it's not on that resources handout, I apologize. I'm not remembering for sure if I have it there. If not, I definitely have it here on my slides, which I will send out to you at the end of this presentation. So I'm not going to go through this. I've already talked about all this about Windows Defender, not really needing an antivirus software, and again, having good habits online. So using secure passwords, using two-factor authentication, and things like that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about metadata and encryption. And it looks like in terms of how we're doing on content, I'll probably need to go to about 11:15, and then we'll be able to answer questions then. So I've got about 20 more minutes of content, I think, here. So metadata is important to understand because it's just good to understand like how information travels online and why some of your information might be exposed in different ways, and if that's meaningful to you or not. For some people it's not, and for some people it is. So metadata is data about data, basically. So in the context of digital communications, it's information about the communications you send and receive. So for example, like the subject line of your emails, about how long your conversation is, your location when you're communicating, those are all types of metadata. Metadata is basically everything except for the communication itself. So it's all like, this is a mess. It's basically saying, like, when I send a message to my friend Christy, it's like, this is a message from Bonnie to Christy. It's about 270 characters long. Like that's kind of, and it's coming from Albany, Oregon to Salem, Oregon. Like it might say something like that. You can kind of look at this. So the reason that metadata becomes interesting or a privacy concern for some people is that it can actually, it stops at a lot of different places. So my message might start on my phone, right? And it'll have this little metadata like, to Alice from Bob, this time to this device, etc. And then that little envelope will then go to a cell tower, and then it might hit a server. And then it might hit another cell tower, and then it might hit another server, and then it might hit a cell tower. Like, so it's going to hit a lot of different places, in a lot of different locations, and it's going to do that in like seconds, which is so crazy. But it goes to all these different places, and then it ends up with Christy, and this all happens instantaneously, so we often don't think about it. But if we think about it, there's a lot that metadata can reveal. And before we get there, I want to just show you this quick 2-minute video because I think it's such a good overview. And it's also going to lead up to what we're going to talk about in a second, which is encryption, which encryption is what kind of locks down this metadata and makes it less easy to see. Metadata can be very, very revealing, and I'm going to show you that in a second too. But let's watch the video really quick, and then we'll go there. Okay, we're actually going to talk about HTTPS everywhere, so I'm going to skip that, and we can talk about it here in just a second. Let me get my screen to come back up, which I always struggle with a little bit. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing my slides again. So what can metadata reveal? Take a look at some of these scenarios. I'll read you one. I'm not going to read them all, but this is just kind of an idea of like, this is how metadata can be revealing, right? So your phone might know that you called the suicide prevention hotline while you were standing on the Golden Gate Bridge, but the topic of the call remains a secret. So you see how metadata can be a little revealing, just knowing some really basic stuff like who you called, who you texted, where you did it from, when you did it. All of that can be kind of revealing. So that's why people sometimes want to legitimately protect their metadata. And so generally the way that we protect our metadata is using encryption. And I imagine that you've heard of encryption before. A really basic idea of what encryption is, it's the mathematical process of making a message unreadable, except to a person who has the key to decrypt it into a readable form. That's really like all you kind of need to know about encryption to understand it basically. There are two kinds of encryption. So there's end-to-end encryption. This is where the information is going to be encrypted from one end to another. So basically no one can see it other than you, the sender, and the recipient. Those are the only people who can see what's actually in that message, as well as all the metadata associated with it. Then there's something called transport layer encryption, and this is what HTTPS everywhere does, which I'll talk about more in a minute. The transport layer encryption, it's info that it is encrypted as you travel. So no one's going to see it as it travels to all those different points. But the website that you're using or the service that you're using can see it. So that's kind of interesting. So let's talk about two different kinds because that helps us, or some services that provide these kind of encryption because that helps understand it a little better. End-to-end encryption is provided by services such as Signal and WhatsApp. Signal is an app that you can install on your mobile device, and it basically encrypts all of your phone calls and messages, text messages or video messages or whatever kind of messages you're sending. It encrypts all of that, so even Signal itself cannot see the data that's being shared. Both users have to be using Signal for that end-to-end encryption to happen. Same with WhatsApp. WhatsApp works the same way. It's the same kind of thing. Some people, I think, are a little more hesitant with WhatsApp because while WhatsApp says it offers end-to-end encryption, it is owned by Facebook, and Facebook is not known for great privacy. So some people just inherently don't trust WhatsApp. There's no evidence to suggest that you shouldn't trust it. Signal, I think, it has a bit wider adoption. Transport layer encryption, so that's where you can't see it travel, but the people that are providing the tool can see it. So can see the metadata and other info. So a virtual private network or a VPN is one of these. What that does is that hides, so anytime I'm using the internet, my internet service provider or my ISP, they can see everything that I'm doing. If I turn a VPN on, that makes it to where only my VPN provider can now see what I'm doing on the internet. Now my ISP can only see that all of my traffic is being routed through to a VPN. That's all they can see. They can only see that everything I'm doing is going to a VPN's servers. The reason that some people like to do that is for privacy purposes. Another reason is some people don't like that an ISP can essentially watch everything that you're doing online and potentially store that info. There is nothing legally that so far, it's a legal gray area actually as to whether or not your ISP can do anything with all of the data it collects about you using the internet. But that's why some people don't like it being collected in the first place, because it's legally gray, and because ISPs like Verizon, for example, and Comcast have tried to lobby to be able to use the info that they have collected about you and sell it to advertisers. Some people don't like that, and so they use a VPN. So for example, I use a VPN. This is not a free service. Generally, I would not trust a VPN that is offered for free, because basically what you're doing is you're putting all your trust into your VPN provider. You're saying, hey, VPN provider, I'm going to give you all my traffic. So you're deciding this is the company now that gets all my data. Is that company trustworthy? Is that who you want to give the data to? So in your resources document, you do have a few, I think at least one website, but there may be more than one, about how to compare VPNs and look at the different ones and see what's trusted. I use Private Internet Access. It's called PIA. It is about $40 a year. And it has no identifying information about me at all, which is kind of interesting too. HTTPS Everywhere. This is a browser extension that makes all of your traffic online encrypted in that transport layer. The reason that this is helpful is some websites don't have HTTPS. So as you'll note in a URL, it always starts with HTTP, right? Most of those, or a lot of them now, do start with HTTPS, and the S stands for secure. Another way that you'll note when you're on an HTTPS site is you'll see the little lock. And so a lot more of these sites are HTTPS, and that's to protect. It means that like anything that you enter into that website will be encrypted as it goes to the next place. The website can see it, but no one can see it in transit. So many banks use HTTPS, for example, on their websites because they want to keep your stuff secure as it travels, but the bank needs to see that info. HTTPS Everywhere. Some websites, as I said, just don't have HTTPS. If you install HTTPS Everywhere by following this link into your browser, it's just going to automatically make every single page you go to a secure one, and it's going to give you transport layer encryption all across the web. So that's why some people use it. It's entirely free, HTTPS Everywhere. The other important thing to note is what cookies are. So cookies come up when you're browsing online on your phone or on your computer. A cookie is info saved by your web browser. When you visit a website, the site is going to store a cookie so it can recognize your device in the future. There are first-party cookies and there are third-party cookies. First party means that the site that you're visiting, and so for example, we go to google.com, Google places its own cookies onto your computer. It will also place third-party cookies onto your computer. These are marketers, advertisers that are paying Google for Google to install the cookies onto your site when you visit their website. And what cookies do, it allows companies to develop detailed histories of the types of sites you frequent. It may also be able to collect info about the stuff you're buying and the stuff you're doing on the stuff you're searching for on different sites. And it's going to allow usually advertisers to advertise to you across websites. So that's why sometimes when you browse Zappos, you go to a page that isn't Zappos, and all of a sudden you're seeing all the stuff you just browsed on Zappos advertised to you. This is what cookies do. Cookies, as you might know, like sometimes you go to a page and it says, hey, you have to accept cookies to be on this site. And the reason why is because this is how websites make money. Websites make money by marketing to you, by allowing marketers to market to you, and by them themselves marketing to you. It's the only way that really internet, not the only way, but it's the way a lot of free websites make money. If not, many free websites just couldn't exist. They have to make money somehow. This is how they make it. So that's why a lot of websites say, hey, we need you to let us put some cookies on there because otherwise we can't exist, right? So that's why kind of turning off cookies all the time is maybe not the best practice for these sites if we really want to be able to keep them going and be able to continue to use these free sites that we love. At the same time, I get why people don't like cookies. People don't want to be tracked. People don't want to be marketed to sometimes. And we should be able to, people who want that option, I think that there should be respect for that as well. And there are ways to actually protect against cookies, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a second. Because another thing to note is that even though it's actually gotten somewhat easier to block cookies or to clear cookies, if you just Google, like, so you have to figure out what web browser you're using, but if you were to just Google, hey, clear cookies on Safari, because I'm using my Safari browser, say I'm using Chrome, clear cookies Chrome, it'll show you right away how to do that. So that's a really easy thing to figure out if you just want to clear your cookies regularly. There are other ways to protect against cookies, and we'll get there. But one of the things is that because people have learned how to block cookies or erase them, a lot of other sites are now doing this method of browser fingerprinting. And so this basically, there are sometimes unique enough things about the way that your computer is configured and the way your web browser is configured that make you uniquely identifiable. And then they use that to sort of track you. It's really difficult to defend against, but there are some things that you can use, and these things are also going to work for cookies. So I'll talk about the most secure one, and one that I don't think many of us even need to use, but I want to point it out, is the Tor browser. Tor browser is free, but it's going to protect you against browser fingerprinting, cookies. It guards your location. It's a really secure browser. The thing is it's slow for that reason. So it's just not a good everyday option. So the only time I'm really ever going to use Tor is when I don't want anyone at all to know what I'm doing online for whatever reason. So that's when you might want to have Tor browser just on hand, just in case it's for some reason you think you need to use it at some point. It is a good option, but it's not a great everyday option. For everyday options to protect against browser fingerprinting and cookies, if you don't want to do things like clear your cookies every once in a while or things like that, maybe you don't even care about cookies, and that's fine too. Just some people do care about this level of privacy, and that's absolutely fine. So there are Privacy Badger is an extension that is free from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. You can install it, and it's going to start blocking cookies and browser fingerprinting. Disconnect is similar. Brave is actually a browser you could use instead of Chrome, instead of Safari, instead of Internet Explorer, whatever it is you use. You could download and use Brave instead for free, and Brave is from the EFF as well, and it protects against browser fingerprinting and cookies as well. You can also, if you don't really know like how susceptible is my browser to browser fingerprinting, this Panopticlick tool from the EFF will actually tell you how well your browser is protected and suggest add-ons to help you protect your privacy. More than likely, they're just going to suggest you install Privacy Badger into your browser, or you start using a browser in an entirely different browser such as Brave.
Bonnie, we have a question about what about an incognito mode in a browser? How's that work?
Yeah, so that is an option. I have heard some reservations about it though. Like, so for example, like Google Chrome is not known to be a very privacy protecting browser. So it's most people who are wanting privacy probably wouldn't use use Chrome. However, sorry, I'm having a little okay. Sorry, I was having a little problem there. But then some people will say like, oh, well, I just go in and I use the Chrome incognito mode. What you're relying on then is I'm relying on Google, the maker of Chrome, to provide me a secure incognito window. So I'm relying on Google's word, kind of, that they're not tracking me, that they're not going to use that info. And in general, they're not. Like, they're not, it's not going to collect your cookies. It's not going to do a browser fingerprint on you. But I think some people just feel a little wary of trusting the same browsers that collect so much information about them and make so much information available about them to trust then that same browser to provide privacy protection. So I think people just feel a disconnect there sometimes, but there isn't any data out there to suggest that they're violating your privacy in incognito mode. So I would just say it just kind of depends on how much you trust your browser and the company that makes your browser, whether or not you're going to trust them to do a good job with your private browsing window or your incognito mode. So that's just something to consider. Hopefully that helps. I want to be able to leave time for questions, and I'm already at 11:15, so I've clearly had a little bit more content than we're really going to have time for. So I'm going to skip over privacy on social networks. I am going to send you these slides, as I said, and really everything that I want to say is almost word for word here on this particular slide. I don't really have time in this class, even when I've taught it in the past, to actually go through each social network and show you how to lock down privacy, but I'm more than happy to do that in a one-on-one appointment anytime. So let's talk if that's something that you want to make sure you have secure. Just note that when you're on a social network, any social network that is free, basically any website that you are free, to a certain extent, you are then the product on that site. You are something, they are going to want to use your information in some way to either improve their product or to help convince you to use their product more, or they're going to use your information in some way. So if you're very, very privacy focused and oriented, you're going to want to pay attention to what you're posting on your social networks and make sure that that's incredibly private. And then also, like I would just say, if you're a Facebook user, like none of that is really private. If you look at their terms of service on these social networks, a lot of the info that you're giving them, it's not yours anymore once it's on their site. It does to some extent become property of that company. I mean, it's yours in that, yes, you still have it and you have access to it, but that company can use it in ways that sometimes aren't clear. So it's just something to pay attention to. It doesn't mean that someone's going to go and use your photos to market or anything like that. They can't do things that are illegal with your info. But that's the thing, is there's so little there's so little law dictating what tech companies can do with our data. That's why people tend to be overly cautious with these, or that's why some people are overly cautious with these things. I just want to see what else I have in here. Yeah, we're just going to have to skip some of this. Just a note that your location is never private when you're using a mobile phone. You're always pinging every cell tower. Like my phone simply sitting here can regularly start pinging towers around me. So it's really, you don't really have a lot of you don't have any location privacy really at all when you're using a mobile phone. I get asked that a lot, so I'm just going to point that out. And then there's a little bit more info here if you've ever asked something like, if I turn off my phone, does that make me more private? Maybe, sometimes it depends. And I kind of mentioned some of the scenarios there where you might be protected or where it might be a little iffy. So I want to point out, and I can show you this at any point, but I'm not going to harp on it now. Lock down your phone because your phone has so much identifiable information about you. It's really a huge loss when you lose that phone. So you at least want to make sure that you have a strong passcode, and I would recommend using your biometric, whether it be your fingerprint or your face. Some people are wary of using that. It only increases your security on your device. It really does. I've checked with a lot of computer security experts. Use it. And then set up your phone's remote finding feature. So anytime my phone is lost, I can go to find my iPhone online and I'll see where it is on the map. I want that done. I need my phone. It's very important that I don't lose it. It has so much info on it. The other thing is I can also remote wipe it clean. So I could be like, someone has it. I don't know how to get access to wherever this phone is now. I'm wiping all the data off of it. So you have that power. You want to set that up. And then I was going to do a little segment on facial recognition and contact tracing, but I'm just not going to do it today because I want to leave time for chatting. I include a link in the facial recognition slide to a recent John Oliver's segment that is full of opinion and adult language, but it's also an excellent overview of facial recognition and how it's come this far. The reason I wanted to talk about it in this context is it's being talked a lot about in the news, and it has been used recently to identify Black Lives Matter protesters, and that has been a huge privacy concern. So I'd be happy to talk about that at some point if you want to talk about it in the question answer point, but I'm not going to do it now. And then some people have had a lot of concerns about contact tracing and the level of how much that violates your privacy. And there are some concerns about that. However, very few states have actually started using the technology Google and Apple have provided that makes contact tracing apps possible. So far, not a lot of people in the US, virtually none, in fact, are actively using this technology to develop apps for contact tracing. And it looks a little concerning that I'm not sure that technology is going to be used the way we thought it would to create contact tracing apps. So it's maybe less of a concern than people originally thought it would be, but we also don't know how this will change over time. So this is a little cheat sheet for you about your privacy and security. It does sort of briefly go over most of the things that we talked about today. Secure your accounts. That includes use long passwords, use good passwords, do not reuse your passwords, turn on two-factor authentication, update your software and your devices, protect your web browsing in some way, but for some people that might not be super important on the privacy end. If you don't really care about marketing, then don't care about it. No biggie. Some people do care about it, and that's when you might want to get stricter about it. The other ways you want to protect your web browsing is just making sure you're not downloading sketchy software, as it says next, and making sure you're going to websites and only entering in info into websites that you know are legitimate. Use Windows Defender if you can and have access to it. Encrypt your communication. I would say that's totally optional. Some people may never encrypt their communication. Some people may only want to do it sometimes. Some people might want to encrypt all the time. Totally a personal decision. Lock down your phone in case it's lost. That's so important. And then the final thing, which I didn't even talk about, is enable encryption on your laptop. You can actually set up any laptop now to have all of your files encrypted, which makes them so difficult to be gotten at if you do end up with malware or something like that. You can Google how to do this on any computer, and I am more than happy to walk you through that process. So again, I'm available for appointments. But let's talk. Send me your questions. Anything that you want to talk to me about, let's put in the questions here. And then someone pointed out most financial institutions only give you 3 tries with a password before they lock you out. That's a really good point, and another good reason to make sure that those passwords, those secure passwords, are stored well and in a way that you can access them, so you don't get blocked out of accounts simply for wanting to keep them secure. That would be awful. Thank you, Dana. So we do virtual Ask a Librarian appointments, and this is on our Contact Us page of the library's website. This is how we could set up an appointment to work on any of this. But I also, let's see, I think I included here we go. Here's my contact info. This is my email address and my phone number. That phone number, however, is only my library office. I'm only in my library office about 2 days a week. I am working from home, so most of the time. So please do email me. That would be the best way. If the times in the virtual Ask the Librarian don't work for you, shoot me an email. Let's set something up. I work Tuesdays through Saturdays, so the only day I'm really not available is Mondays. But let's work together. I have helped people set up password managers and just talk if some of these concepts were confusing, or you're not really sure what your threat level should be for certain stuff or anything like that. I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. Any other questions or anything?
There is another one about conflicts using multiple anti-malware software.
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't found, so the most experience that I've had with using malware software is using Bitdefender and Malwarebytes. I do use both of those on my computer, on my Mac, and then I also use both of those on my PC, which is also running Windows Defender. And I have not experienced anything not cooperating nicely or causing any problems for me as a user or for the other programs I have installed. So those three pieces of software do seem to work well and in tandem, and they don't seem to conflict with one another in a way that's troublesome. So hopefully that helps. But like I said, I don't have experience with all antivirus softwares. So. Thank you, Francis. Thank you for joining us. So if there aren't other questions, feel free to get on out of here, go about your day. Like I said, hit me up, contact me if you want to talk more about any of these concepts or work on any of them together. And I'm going to hang out a little bit longer if you come up with questions. So I will hang here. I'm going to put me, see, I am on the screen. Good. Mary, you want to join me?
Sure. I think that's me. There we go.
Okay, there you go. Now we're both here. So feel free to ask us if you've got anything else. Oh, and something I forgot to share is that on the adult events website, there is, let's see. I showed you earlier that if we go to events at the top and then adult events, there's a section under adult events called Digital Life. And what it has is some of the other, the content from some of the other classes I've taught. So for example, oh, I'm already there. Here we go. Computer workshops, Digital Life, right here under ongoing events. Click on it. And so this is actually the slides for today, though the ones here are not quite as up to date as the ones I just showed you. So I'm gonna update this. I'm gonna update this. But like the hidden info online class I've done misinformation and news. I've taught that class for the last year and a half. So there's a lot of good content there if you want to check it out. And then I've done a class on photo management. So if you're interested in getting started managing your digital photos, you might be interested in that. And at the end of this, I'm actually probably, since I'm not getting any more questions, I'm probably going to end this here in a second. A little survey will come up if you have a second to answer it about other classes you might want, other topics you might want us to do classes on. Let me know. I would like to know that. I'm always looking for other stuff people want to know, and maybe I could offer that at some point.
Actually, we do have another question. Which wasn't mentioned. Why not use Norton antivirus?
So I have been hearing that Norton just doesn't do a good job of protecting you against malware. There have been a few instances where Norton didn't protect people against malware that it arguably should have. So people aren't finding Norton to be nearly as like cutting edge and up to date as some of the other antivirus software suites that are getting reviewed better. So like Bitdefender gets just really amazing reviews because it's just been better at protecting people. I mean, that's the thing though, like, is honestly none of the, if you read that, I would really suggest reading that Wirecutter article about antivirus if you're interested too, because it's really interesting. But like basically none of the antivirus software out there, including Windows Defender, has been able to protect against all malware at all times, interestingly. But what Windows Defender has done is because Windows Defender is specific to a Windows computer, it's really good about updating itself and knowing when it has those flaws and that it wouldn't have protected against a certain malware. I mean, so far, I don't think anyone's been infected, but like what I mean is like it'll notice like, oh my gosh, we would have been susceptible to this if it had come our way or if it had hit some of the computers that we're protecting. Anyways, it's interesting, but I think that there's a lot to suggest that Norton and McAfee in particular are not effective antivirus suites. And in fact, they're annoying because they constantly have little pop-ups and stuff asking you to do things. They tend to install other software that you don't need. So yeah, they're just really not recommended anymore is what I'm finding.
Thank you. One more question. My computer offers to save new passwords as I create them. Is this a good idea?
It depends. So I would generally almost always say no, but what I've noticed is that some browsers are starting their own sort of password management systems. So Safari, and I'm not sure, honestly, I don't think I would trust Chrome to do it, but I think Chrome might be offering it too. But Safari, if you're a Mac user or if you're an iPhone user, you might use Safari to get on the web. And Safari actually has now a built-in password manager, and it's accessible through your biometric. So I can actually set it up. So I do have some passwords saved in my Safari browser on my iPhone, but I can only access them with my thumbprint. So I have to hit my thumb and then it will load my password. I feel pretty comfortable with that setup, mostly because it's requiring a biometric. In a lot of cases, if someone's trying to hack me, they're not going to have my biometric unless they somehow have my hand and they like push it on, like that. I don't see that scenario happening where someone's holding me hostage and makes me push my hand on the phone, but it is possible. So if I'm really worried about it, then maybe I wouldn't want to do that either. But and I've heard of Chrome supposedly doing this, but I haven't seen that in action. And I just don't have a lot of trust for Google in terms of privacy. Though that's not to say anything about security. And so maybe Google is good at security and would be an okay one to trust. But that all being said, I would not save anything into a browser unless it was something that could only be accessed with my biometric or with some very secure password that I set up for me to access those other passwords, basically. So no, generally I don't save passwords in my browser. And in fact, that was one of the things whenever I set up my password manager, that was my big problem I was a Chrome user at the time, and I had all of my passwords saved in Chrome. So basically, as soon as someone could get my computer, if they could manage to get it open and get to Chrome, they'd have access to everything. Like you did not need a thumbprint or a password or anything to get all those passwords. You just had to open up Chrome and start going to some of the websites where I have passwords saved. And in fact, you can even see, it's very easy in Chrome to go and see like, hey, what are all the websites where I have passwords saved? And it'll tell you. So a hacker can easily just like, okay, great, I'll go to that one and that one and that one and take all this info from you. So that's the thing. You just don't want to save them unless there's some sort of security there to prevent someone from also just jumping right in. So that I had to unsave all my passwords basically, and then resave them into LastPass. But it's actually kind of convenient for moving them all to LastPass because I have them all in one place. I have them all in Chrome. So it's really easy for me to be like, oh, okay, so ALA, need to put it here, bank, need to put it here, you know, so I just got to kind of transfer everything over and reset the passwords, which was kind of nice.
And there is a mention of Chrome does have a password manager, which is passwords.google.com.
Awesome. And I know more browsers are doing this. So if you feel comfortable with that, I mean, password managers are supposed to be really great. So I think it's just a matter of deciding, like, are you okay with using the password manager from that particular company that's offering it? So are you comfortable with that particular company being the one who owns your password manager and manages it for you? And the other really cool thing about LastPass, just to say, so LastPass, I have it installed as an app on my phone, and LastPass, I have it set the same way where if I put my fingerprint down, LastPass opens and I can see all my passwords. And then I can just copy paste my passwords into my browser really easily. So that's kind of how I use LastPass on my phone. Well, it is about 4 minutes after 11:30. I think we got the questions. Thank you, Francis. So yeah, thank you everyone. Please fill out the survey if you have time, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll figure out how to turn this off. There we go. End webinar. Okay, bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye, thanks.